Now, the US journalist Evan Gershkovich is back in court. We've seen images of him in the last hour for espionage in Russia in a proceeding which is classified as a state secret. Now, that means no reporters, no friends, no family members, or even US embassy staff allowed into that courtroom, where Gershkovich faces up to 20 years in prison if convicted. The Wall Street Journal reporter was arrested in March of last year. The accusation that he collected secret evidence about a Russian tank manufacturer on the orders of the US Central Intelligence Agency. Well, we're going to talk about all the latest with our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Douglas, there's no doubt at all, is there, that this is a sham trial?
Not for the Wall Street Journal, not for the U.S. government, not for most independent observers, human rights organizations, the international community watching this trial. Look, you said in your outset that he is back in court, Evan Gershkovich, on espionage charges. The Wall Street Journal would probably be fine with that, the way you presented that story. They'd want you to add one word. They would like you to add he's back in court on false espionage charges, false spying charges. The Wall Street Journal, the point they've been making from the outset is that this is almost a Stalinist-style show trial of the worst kind. It is hostage diplomacy. It is using a legitimate reporter, a man whose only crime, from the Wall Street Journal's perspective, from the U.S. government's perspective, was doing journalism. He was committing journalism, essentially, doing his job. I want to show you, though, a quote from the CEO of Dow Jones, which is the umbrella company of the Wall Street Journal, of which Almar Latour is publisher. Look at that. It's a sham trial, he said. It's fake charges. However that's served up, it doesn't change those underlying facts. Fake charges brought by an autocratic regime that is waging a war on journalism and reliable information at home and abroad. However the trial will take place, it doesn't take away the outrageous underlying assault on free press and on Evan's freedom. End quote. Now, this is exactly the point that people are trying to make here. Russia has been trying to portray this as a trial, as you said, a man who was collecting information about a tank manufacturer, a factory which was located outside the city where the trial is taking place, outside of Yekaterinburg in the Urals region of Russia, about 900 miles east of Moscow, presumably in cahoots on the orders of, as you said, the CIA, making it all sound like spying. Now, to many Russians hearing that, it will ring true. A lot of Russians, Russian reporters have showed up at the court. Their narrative is that this is a spy arrested by the Russians. The problem is right now in today's Russia, journalism does equate with spying because the very act of trying to get two sides of a story, trying to get balanced information, trying to collect news gathering, as it's defined, the journalistic trade, this is all something that is essentially taboo. You're not supposed to do that. The only narrative that goes right now in Russia is the narrative of the special military operation of Russia's war against Ukraine as fed by the Kremlin and its controlled news outlets. What Evan Gershkovich did is he ran counter to this narrative by trying to present accurate information that ran counter at times to that narrative. He is on trial on bogus charges. I'm going to avoid the both sidesism, as the Wall Street Journal is encouraging other people covering this trial to do. Not this false equivalency. On the one hand, Russia says, on the other hand, the West says. This is a false trial. Acquittals are almost unheard of in Russia. It's very likely that this trial will lead to a conviction. The judge overseeing it boasted in a recent interview that he's only, I think, acquitted 4 people in his entire career.
Yeah, acquittals very, very rare, as you say, in these kind of cases. I mean, is there any way of knowing what we can expect as a conclusion to all of this?
No, and anyone who professes to tell you is lying. Even the Wall Street Journal right now say that they really don't know what's going to happen. Technically, on paper, yes, Evan Gershkovich could face, if convicted, and remember I said acquittals are almost unheard of in these types of trials, if convicted in this sham trial, he could face up to 20 years in prison. Is that likely to happen? Probably not on the pure past precedent. In many of these cases, there's been, I called it hostage diplomacy. He's being used as a political pawn. What does the regime want? The regime wants one of its own released. There's been a lot of speculation. I have to underline speculation. We do not know about who that might be. There is one man. His name is Vadim Krasikov. He is a Russian with reported links to the FSB security services. He's sitting in a German jail, in a Berlin jail cell. Why? Because he is suspected of 2 murders. One in Moscow, knocking off a Moscow restaurateur in 2013, and another knocking off a Chechen Chechen national in Germany a few years back. He's in a German jail. Putin hinted in his interview, you might remember this, with the U.S. propagandist Tucker Carlson a few months back, hinted that he might want to get him out, to get Vadim Krasikov released. So there's been speculation, could there be a swap? Gershkovich for Krasikov. Obviously, it's the arch cynicism to try to turn this into a hostage swap deal, but there are reports that American, Russian security officials are quietly negotiating some sort of swap behind the scenes. Like I said, this comes with a warning tag. We don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea, and anyone professes to tell you they do is lying.
Let's broaden this slightly, Doug. We're going to talk now about the ongoing crackdown on dissent. Anyone in general who shares information that runs counter to the Kremlin's narrative about Russia's war in Ukraine. The trial is getting underway, isn't it, after another kind of tightening of the screws, really, of the situation.
The screws are so tight right now, it's almost like you can't even untighten them, right? Take a wrench and try to do it. You have a situation with political dissent has been all but entirely stifled. Freedom of expression in Russia has been all but entirely stifled. Neighbor against neighbor, a lot of distrust. There is no room for alternative narratives to the Kremlin and the Kremlin-controlled state news outlets. Now, what we've seen is this latest move was a ban on 81 European news outlets operating in Russia. 81, including French organizations such as Agence France-Presse, the AFP news agency, Le Monde, La Croix, Libération, left-leaning daily in Germany, Der Spiegel in Italy, Repubblica, La Stampa, all of these publications among a long list. Russia says it's a retaliation for the EU slapping similar interdictions on Russian news outlets. It's true. The Council of EU, back in early May, did ban 4 Russia-linked news, I would call them propaganda outlets, based here in Europe. One called The Voice of Europe, which the Czech Republic accused of basically approaching parliamentarians to try to spread Russian propaganda ahead of the European elections. Voice of Europe, the RIA Novosti, Kremlin-controlled, Kremlin-funded news agency, the Kremlin narrative, Rossiyskaya Gazeta, and Izvestia. All of them Kremlin-controlled. So there's false equivalency here. The outlets that were banned here were clearly Kremlin-funded propaganda news outlets. The ones that Russia says it's banning in retaliation are actually high-quality, factually, high-quality, respected news outlets doing exactly what Evan Gershkovich was trying to do in Russia when he was arrested last March 2023, committing the crime of journalism. And yes, the screws are tightening, and there's no sign that they're going to get any looser anytime soon.